Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into a topic today that's, it's really captured your imagination, and I have to say mine too. The pyramids. Those incredible, colossal, I guess you could call them triangles, piercing the Egyptian skyline.
Yeah. It's funny. I never really thought of them as triangles before, but yeah, I see what you mean. And yeah, you sent in some incredible articles and archaeological findings on the pyramids, and we've been digging through them.
Our mission, if you will, is to not just look at, the pretty pictures of these incredible structures. We want to understand how they evolved, what their purpose was, and really why they continue to sort of like hold such a powerful grip on our imaginations even today.
Exactly. Like, what is it about these giant stone structures that just, draws us in like that?
Yeah, there's a mystery there. So let's start, way back at the beginning. Our sources point to around 3000 BC, the earliest dynastic period, when the first families of Egyptian rulers were starting to really solidify their power. And this appears to be a pivotal moment for burial customs.
Right. So it's not just simple graves anymore, The elite, they're starting to construct these really elaborate rock-cut tombs, often topped with these structures called mastabas.
Mastabas. So tell us a little bit more about those.
So imagine like a flat-roofed rectangular building, but with sloping sides, usually made of mud brick and stone. And, these mastabas, they're really the direct predecessors to the pyramids.
Okay. So already we're seeing these hints of this monumental architecture to come.
Yeah. In fact, there's Mastaba 3808 at Saqqara. It dates back to the first dynasty, and it actually already looks like a step pyramid. This suggests they were experimenting with different shapes and forms early on.
Huh, that's fascinating. So they're already thinking beyond just a basic rectangular shape.
Definitely. And this whole idea of a raised structure, it's not totally new.
Right, because our sources talk about the Benben, right?
Yeah.
That primordial mound of creation from Egyptian mythology.
Yes, exactly. That mound rising from the waters of chaos. It was a really fundamental idea in their cosmology. And, if we zoom out even further, we can see evidence of burial mounds called tumuli with megalithic monuments in the Saharan region of Niger. And some of these date back to like 4700 BC. So even earlier than the Egyptian mastabas.
Wow. So this idea of raised structure for burial, it has a really, really long history in that part of Africa.
Yeah. Really makes you think about the origins of these traditions.
Absolutely. So we've got these early mounds, these mastabas, and then bam, we see this incredible leap forward to what we all picture when we think Egyptian pyramid, the step pyramid of Djoser.
Yeah. It's really quite a jump, isn't it? So this step pyramid, it was built around 2630 BC for King Djoser of the Third Dynasty, and it's considered the first known pyramid in Egypt and the oldest complete stone pyramid that we've found.
And tell me, this is true, right? It was actually made by stacking 6 mastabas on top of each other. Like they started with one and just kept going.
That's the leading theory, yes. It likely started as a fairly large square mastaba, but then they just kept adding more layers, expanding it in stages until it reached its final impressive height. And get this. It was originally 62.5 meters tall.
That's incredible. I mean, just imagine the amount of stone and clay needed for something that big.
Hundreds of thousands of cubic meters. The sheer volume is mind-boggling.
And we can't forget about what lies beneath the step pyramid. Our sources mention an extensive underground corridor system, a deep pit, and a labyrinth of tunnels stretching for at least 5.5 kilometers.
Yeah, it's really quite a complex and mysterious space. And, there's actually speculation that parts of this underground network might actually predate the pyramid itself. So it's possible they built the pyramid to sort of complement this existing sacred space underground.
Oh, wow. That adds a whole other layer of intrigue to the step pyramid. So we've gone from this stepped design of Djoser's pyramid, and now we move into the Fourth Dynasty and the reign of Sneferu. And Sneferu seems to have been absolutely crucial in developing the true pyramid shape, those smooth-sided structures that we're so familiar with.
Oh, absolutely. Sneferu was a prolific builder and a really key figure in this whole architectural transformation. We really see that with the pyramid at Meidum. It might have actually been started by his predecessor, Huni, but it started as a step pyramid, and then they tried to modify it into a true pyramid. Sadly, it experienced some collapses later on, but still.
So, a little bit of a setback there, but Sneferu kept going, right? He constructed 2 more pyramids at Dashur. First, there's the Bent Pyramid, which is, the name kind of says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah. The Bent Pyramid. It has this really distinctive change in angle about halfway up. It's a really unique structure. And it's huge, with a base of 189 meters square and standing over 104 meters tall. And what's really cool is that it still has a lot of its original smooth limestone casing. So you can actually see how these pyramids were meant to look gleaming white in the desert sun.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't just this rough, stone surface.
No, it was this gleaming, polished surface that would have reflected the sunlight. And internally, it's got this complex network of chambers and passageways. It's really quite a testament to, their engineering skills and how they were learning and adapting as they went along.
You really get the sense that they were experimenting, running into challenges and then like changing their designs.
Definitely. And then you have the Red Pyramid, also at Dashur. Now, this one is generally considered the first successfully completed true pyramid. And although they built it with a shallower angle compared to, say, the Great Pyramid, it's still massive. It's the third largest pyramid in Egypt, reaching a height of 105 meters. And it's also really well preserved, so we can actually see inside, explore its passageways and chambers.
So Sneferu really laid the groundwork for what we think of as the golden age of pyramid construction. Which, of course, brings us to the Giza Plateau and those three iconic pyramids, the Great Pyramid, Khafre's Pyramid, and Menkaur's Pyramid.
This is the peak, especially during the Fourth Dynasty. This is the pinnacle of Egyptian pyramid construction. The Great Pyramid, built for Khufu, Sneferu's son, is just an absolute marvel of engineering. Think about it. A structure as tall as a 40-story building. And they built this thousands of years ago with incredible precision.
And it's not just the sheer size, it's what's inside that keeps us coming back for more, right? There's the King's Chamber with its massive sarcophagus, the Grand Gallery with its incredibly high ceiling, and then the Queen's Chamber, which, who knows what it was really for, maybe storage. And then you have those more recent discoveries like the Big Void, this huge empty space inside the pyramid that we still don't understand.
Yeah, it's just incredible. After centuries of studying these pyramids, they still hold secrets. The Big Void, especially, has really stirred up a lot of debate among researchers. And then there's the second pyramid, built by Khafre, Khufu's son.
Yeah.
It might look taller than the Great Pyramid from some angles because it's on higher ground and has a steeper angle, but it's actually a bit smaller in total height. And let's not forget the three smaller pyramids nearby, which are thought to have been built for his wives.
And then there's the third pyramid, the smallest of the three, built by Menkaur, Khafre's son. And they even found an inscription at the entrance that records his death date. And inside, they discovered these beautifully decorated stone panels. It's just amazing to think that this whole Giza Plateau was once a bustling necropolis.
It really boggles the mind. The organization and labor required to build these structures is just staggering. For the Great Pyramid alone, they used an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks. And each block weighs, on average, about 2.5 tons.
Yeah, I read about that. Can you imagine trying to move those things? And our sources talk about this really sophisticated conscription system where they would bring workers in from all over Egypt and they would be compensated for their labor. There were even provisions made for their families.
And they were organized into these huge teams working together, to move these massive stones. They used sleds. And they might have even wet the sand to reduce friction and make it easier to pull those heavy stones.
And they did all of this without pulleys. Can you believe that?
It really is a testament to their ingenuity and really their organizational skills. It's mind-blowing. Now, as we move into the 5th and 6th dynasties, we start to see a change. The pyramids, they get smaller, and the quality of the construction isn't quite as impressive.
So it's like we see this peak with the 4th dynasty pyramids, and then things start to shift.
Exactly. The scale changes, but something else really interesting is happening, especially on the inside.
You're talking about the pyramid texts, right?
Yes. So during the 5th and 6th dynasties, even though the pyramids are getting smaller, we start to see this really important intellectual and religious development.
Starts with King Yunus, right, in the 5th dynasty. That's when we first see these extensive religious texts inscribed on the interior walls of the pyramids. They're called the pyramid texts, and they're the oldest known substantial religious writings that we've discovered.
Yeah, they give us so much insight into their beliefs and rituals. And the Pyramid of Unas, while it's not nearly as big as the Giza pyramids, it's incredibly important because of these inscribed texts. And get this, by the time of Ramses II, centuries later, this pyramid was already in ruins. He actually had to order its restoration.
Wow, so they were already falling apart back then.
Yeah, time takes its toll, And then you have Pepi II in the 6th dynasty. He built what's considered the last of the large pyramids in Egypt at Saqqara. It was shorter than the earlier pyramids, and after his reign, the pyramids just never reached that same massive scale again.
So that's really the end of the era of the truly gigantic pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
But the story doesn't end there, right? Because our sources say that the 18th dynasty, much later in Egyptian history, was actually the last period to see any pyramid construction in Egypt itself.
That's right. Around 1500 BC, Ahmose Sirth, the pharaoh who started the New Kingdom, built what's believed to be the last Egyptian pyramid at Abydos.
And what's interesting about this one is that it was discovered in ruins, right?
Yeah, back in 1899. And get this, they never found a burial chamber inside. Ahmose Sissoka's mummy was actually found somewhere else entirely. So there's a lot of debate about what its purpose was. Was it symbolic? Was it just a cenotaph? It's another one of those pyramid mysteries.
Oh, I love that. It's like even after all this time, the pyramids are still keeping secrets.
Oh, absolutely. And even today, we're still making new discoveries and uncovering more mysteries. Back in the late 1700s, Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie, he noticed that the Great Pyramid might actually have 8 sides. It's a really subtle feature. Each face is actually made of 2 very slightly concave planes, and then an aerial photograph taken in 1940 confirmed it.
It's like, how did they even do that?
It's amazing. And then you have more recent discoveries, like the papyrus fragments they found in 2013. They call them the Diary of Merer, and they actually describe the transportation of the limestone from the quarries at Tura to the Great Pyramid. It even mentions an official named Ankaf who was overseeing the project. It's like a first-hand account from someone who was actually there.
And who could forget the Khufu ship? It's this incredibly well-preserved ship that was buried right next to the Great Pyramid. It was discovered in 1954, and it's incredible. And of course, there's the Big Void, that huge empty space inside the pyramid discovered in 2017. We still don't know what it is. It just goes to show that, these ancient structures, they still have so much to teach us. And it's kind of wild to think that Cairo, this modern, bustling city, has spread right up to the edge of the Giza pyramids.
Yeah, it's a bit of a jarring juxtaposition, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay. So we've talked about the history, the construction, but what about the why? What did these pyramids symbolize? What was their real purpose? I mean, our sources are pretty clear that they were primarily tombs for the pharaohs and sometimes their consorts. But it's got to be more than that, right?
Yeah, it goes so much deeper. You have to think about the whole concept of divine kingship, The pharaoh was seen as a god king, and his death was a transformation, a journey to the afterlife. And they were especially connected to the sun god, Ra.
Oh, right. Because the shape of the pyramids themselves, they're supposed to represent the rays of the sun descending to earth, right?
Exactly. And the pyramidions, the capstones, they were often gilded with gold or other precious metals, so they would have gleamed like the sun. And then you have the step pyramids, which some people see as a symbolic staircase, helping the pharaoh's soul ascend to the heaven.
And that brings us back to the Benben stone, that primordial mound of creation.
Yeah.
The idea that the pyramids were meant to echo that original act of creation is it's so fascinating.
Yeah. And it really emphasizes their connection to, the cosmos and their whole worldview. And then there's the placement. Almost all the pyramids are on the west bank of the Nile, and the west was associated with the setting sun, the realm of the dead. It just reinforces that idea of the pyramids being primarily funerary monuments.
Right. And there's also that theory that the shafts inside the Great Pyramid were actually aligned with specific stars, like they were meant to launch the pharaoh's soul into the afterlife.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. And, some people even call the pyramids resurrection machines. It's a metaphor, of course, but it really captures that sense of transformation and rebirth that they were trying to achieve. It's a far cry from those old ideas about them being Joseph's granaries or something, or that they were full of hidden wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah. But I guess kind of makes sense. These structures are so mysterious, so monumental, it's natural to want to find meaning in them.
Absolutely. So how many pyramids are we talking about?
Well, sources say there are at least 118 identified pyramids in Egypt. And Carl Richard Lepsius, he was a pioneer in Egyptology. He cataloged 67 of them back in the 19th century. And we keep finding more.
It's incredible. It really is.
It is. And it's amazing how many have survived, even if a lot of them are pretty badly damaged. And almost all of them are on the west bank of the Nile, clustered in these pyramid fields, like Giza, Saqqara, Dashur.
It's like they deliberately chose those locations, And the pyramids weren't just limited to Egypt. The Kingdom of Kush in modern-day Sudan, they built pyramids too. They were inspired by the Egyptians, but they developed their own distinct style. They found about 180 royal pyramid tombs there.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And there's this funny story about Al-Aziz Uthman. He was a sultan in the 12th century, and he actually tried to demolish the Giza pyramids.
What?
Yeah. Can you imagine? Luckily, it was just too big a job, so he gave up after only damaging Menkaur's pyramid a little bit.
Oh, thank goodness. That would have been such a tragedy. Well, as we wrap up our deep dive here, I think it's safe to say we've covered a lot of ground. From those early burial mounds to the grandeur of the Great Pyramids and then the later pyramids with their focus on religious texts. These monuments, they really are a testament to the ancient Egyptians' ingenuity, their incredible organizational skills, and their complex beliefs about the afterlife.
And despite all the research that's been done, they still hold mysteries. We're still learning new things about them all the time. The construction methods, the exact meanings behind the symbolism, it's an ongoing process of discovery.
So here's something to think about. Those ancient Egyptians, they invested so much time, energy, and resources into these structures. It makes you wonder, what did they believe about the afterlife? That it was so important to create these monumental tombs. And when you look at our own world today, do you see any echoes of that? That same drive to create lasting legacies. I'll leave you with that thought. Join us next time for another deep dive.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure diving in with you. Thanks for listening.